There you go.
Oh, yeah.
In return for missing.
Okay, we're gonna call our Community Development Authority meeting to order. Roll call, Tim?
Zellner.
Here.
Hertzberg.
Here.
Brown.
Here.
Dassow.
Here.
Runge.
Here.
Toots.
Here.
Okay, first item is minutes. Would you like to approve?
I make a motion to approve the minutes from November 16th.
Second.
Kristen, second by, I heard
You got
Tricia.
first.
Did he get it first?
I'm just closer.
All right, Gary was second then. Call the question. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it. Public comments. Is there anyone here who'd like to make any comments?
Yes, I would. Is this fine? Do I need to stand at a mic or anything? Okay.
No, you can be right there.
Well,
Just if you can state your name and address.
Okay, I was curious about that. I'm Catherine Westby at 608 Fifth Street. I actually spoke with Tim last week because I saw this on your agenda, and I realized you're still working through this process. And when I say this, I'm talking about the potential programs for the funding, affordable housing funding. Anyway, I saw it on the village agenda, I believe, in the last month, that, you had the funds from the TID, and I was like, I hope you bring up funding for homes that are older than 50 years old. Now, I'm a little biased because my home is more than 50 years old. I'm also a planner, like Tim, and I work with other communities and creating these programs. I know you're still talking about it, so I can't really comment too much because I haven't been at a meeting, but I did want to bring up that, you have, I believe it's 25% of your homes were built before 1980. Now that's because we've had a lot of homes built in the last 5 to 10 years. There would probably be more if we didn't have all those homes. Trying to think of just other things I was going to bring up. The reason to address those homes that are older than 50 years is because probably the laundry list of things that need to be done. We've had our furnace had to have service on it ever since we've moved here every year. And we just had them out again this morning. Because we know it's something we're going to have to put in, but we also need a new roof soon. We fixed our landscaping to fix drainage. We have to fix our cabinets at some point because they're still original. And it's a home that's probably had more than 20 children in it. As I've learned, the different families that have been there, it just needs a little help. And, while we know we are going to do those things, it'd be easier or nice to be able to address those sooner rather than later. We moved here right before the pandemic, and apologize, I'm just trying to give you a glimpse of what it is. And I know there's on our block, or at least the 2 blocks, all new families buying homes. We've all had furnace repairs. In the last 2 months, I've seen them on the street. So anyway, I was just thinking it would be good to have a nice program for homes that are older than 50 years, for homeowners that we're going to stay for a couple of years to help us as we try and improve our lots and homes. And yeah, I'm sure I'm going to be following a little more. I know this is going to take a long time, not a long time, but it's going to be a process to figure out what programs you're wanting to put through. So.
Perfect.
That's it.
Thank you. Did you say 608 Fifth Street?
Yes, Mr. Zellner. I think I found out that you used to live there at some
That was
point.
where I grew up.
Oh, that's
Yes.
So when you said that, I was like,
It's a very
I think she
lovely
said that.
home, but I'm pretty sure the last 2 families, they had young ones, and there's a lot of things we need to fix.
well, I don't think it's 50 years old, but anyway.
I hear there's.
We'll not check the DCI map for the age. Or
I heard there's money in the attic. In
I'm
that
pretty
house.
sure.
Yeah,
I'm
check the
pretty sure.
rafters.
So,
Yeah.
thank you for your comments. So, okay. Wow, that's just a freak out thing right off the bat. Somebody says that, it's like, wait a minute. Okay. Anyone else? We're good, okay. First item then we have is presentations. Presentations from WIDA Community and Economic Development Officer Rebecca Giroux?
Giroux.
Giroux?
Very close. Very
Okay. Programs and scoring.
All right. Hello. Good evening, all of you. My name is Rebecca Giroux. I'm one of WIDA's Community and Economic Development Officers. So we're a statewide team. We have 5 economic development officers that each have a different territory. So my territory is the Central Southwest, which is the West Coast, Buffalo, La Crosse, Trempealeau County, over through Dane, Dodge, Jefferson County. So approximately 19 counties. So here to just kind of give a quick overview with housing tax credits as well as some other opportunities that WIDA has for funding affordable housing developments throughout the state. So who is WIDA? So WIDA is Wisconsin Housing and Economic Development Authority. We are almost coming up on 50 years. You can move forward. And our mission is to stimulate the state's economy and improve the quality of life for Wisconsin residents through affordable housing and business financing products. And we offer financing and expertise to expand equitable access to affordable housing and economic opportunity. Next slide. So how do we work? So WIDA's traditional financing tools and programs are effective, yet of course our market share alone is not sufficient to drive change. So we do work collaboratively, adaptively, innovatively, with different approaches which are needed to address the evolving challenges such as homelessness in Wisconsin. So we'll dive right into our multifamily resources. All right, so typically our multifamily resources can be within two different buckets, and they can also cross within buckets as well. So we'll talk a little bit about housing tax credits, what those are, and then we also do offer multifamily debt financing. All right, so WIDA is the allocator of Wisconsin's federal and state housing tax credit programs. Since the start of the program, we've allocated over $342 million in housing tax credits, which has helped us to create and preserve more than 53,000 affordable rental units as of 2019. Of course, the developments that were awarded credits last year are still being developed right now, so that of course will be additional units there. Properties, just so you know, if it's a tax credit property, it will have a 15-year initial compliance period, which we'll talk about, but overall, properties that receive tax credits have a 30-year affordability component, meaning those properties that get credits are 30 years commitment for affordable housing, which is great for municipalities. So what are tax credits? All right, so a housing tax credit is a dollar for dollar offset for federal tax liability for the investor, and they come with a 10-year investment period, and we'll kind of work through some math there in a little bit, which if no one thought they'd be doing some math on what night is it, Wednesday? It's a little weird because we were off on Monday with the holiday. So the equity generated from the sale of tax credits allows developers who are developing these housing properties to build a property with a lower than normal debt load, which then allows them to offer affordable rents. So housing tax credit equity, if you're talking more of the 9% deal, which we'll get into, can be as much as 50 to 60% of the total development budget. So pretty significant investment in affordable housing. So the parties that are typically involved in these developments are WIDA, of course, as the allocator of the credits. You have your developer, you have your investor. The municipality also has a very large and active role, and of course sometimes there's a syndicator to kind of work through the tax credit process. So what does that affordability look like for these developments? So credits are available to developments that set aside a percentage of units to be rented at affordable rents. So 20%, these are the minimums. So 20% of the units in a development needs to be rented to households that are at or below 50% county median income, or 40% of the units need to be rented to households at or below 60% county median income. Just as a caveat, I add an extra bullet point there because most properties that receive tax credits allocate about 80 to 90% of their units at affordable rents. So we do have a few different types of credits here in the state of Wisconsin. So the 9% is a federal program. So every state has housing tax credits in this federal 9% bucket. This is a competitive process. The state of Wisconsin receives about $15.5 million each year to allocate, and that's based on our population. So if our population grows, we may get more credits. If it decreases, you could get less. Of course, your states like Texas, New York, California have a much larger credit pool, and then smaller states with a smaller population like Montana have kind of like a minimum threshold of credit that they get because they don't have a larger population. And we have one allocation cycle per year. So this is more of the competitive process. This is what most developers want because it's the highest amount of credit that you can get, but it's also the most competitive credit that we have available. We also have a 4% credit. So this is a lower credit. As you can see, it's 4%. It's non-competitive. So this is a perfect space for deals that maybe aren't going to meet the high competitive score, but they still could meet a minimum score so they could get this non-competitive credit. It's also good for newer developers that haven't gotten tax credits. This is where this federal 4% comes in. It's tied to our state's tax exempt bond volume cap. So typically, if you meet that minimum scoring threshold, you can receive credit. We can do a year-round allocation, so any time a development wants to apply for this, they can, whereas the 9%, we only open applications once a year, which is towards the end of the year. And then lastly, the state of Wisconsin is fortunate because we do have a 4% state credit. Not all states have that. So this was created in 2018 under the Walker administration. It is competitive like the 9%. We have about $7 million available each year in this state pool. And this state credit was designed to complement the 4% credit. So to kind of pair it, the 9% here is always a standalone product. Okay, you can only apply in that 9% and get the 9%. You can apply for the federal 4% on its own, but to receive a state credit, it has to be paired with that federal 4%. So that's kind of how those credits work out. And we'll talk a little bit more about how they all work out in a moment here. So next, kind of talk about, I mentioned scoring and what does that mean? So WIDA works with a qualified allocation plan. So all states that allocate credit have what we call a qualified allocation plan. Basically, it's a document, really exciting reading. It's about 45 pages if you want to take a look at it. That basically says this is how our tax credits are scored and how they receive credit. We have a 2-year QAP cycle, meaning every 2 years we update our plan and update the scoring because we know things change very quickly. Hence, the pandemic, that's making things change very quickly for a lot of our jobs. And we do allow listening sessions and virtual means to obtain feedback. And I mention that because we are currently in our 2nd year of our QAP, and so we will soon be releasing the 2023-2024 QAP probably towards the end of the year, meaning we're going to be opening up feedback shortly within the next few months here. And I will, of course, keep everybody here updated.
Rebecca, mind if I jump in a second?
Yeah.
So on the scoring, you said that changes from time to time. Does it change in terms of the weighting or the actual scoring criteria themselves?
A little bit of both. So right now the QAP, for example, has 15 scoring categories that developments can score points in. So the number of points in each category could change. The categories themselves could change. One of the categories that we added recently was economic opportunity, meaning looking for developments that are going to be high areas of that economic opportunity, so high need for affordable housing. So that was a newer scoring category that we've added. We've also changed some scoring weights as well. In the last few years, there were some kind of minimum requirements that we have for developments, but they were getting points for it. So we said, you know what, those are going to be really just minimum requirements as threshold items and take those away from scoring and then add additional scoring options in there. So great question. And then of course, it's also your great information for when the application cycle's open, when applications are due, and things of that nature. Next slide, and I can send links out to everybody where these things are found on our website as well. So I mentioned the scoring a little bit. So we know that not all developments are going to be equal, right? So the competitive credit, this 9% credit, we put it into what we call set-asides. So then that way, you don't have, let's say, a 40-unit development in Waukesha going up against a 150-unit development in Milwaukee, because that 150-unit probably is going to cash flow a little bit better. Because of that, we divide it out into different set-asides. So then it's kind of levels the playing field for development a little bit. So we do have a general set-aside, which most developments, any development could apply in. So that's where you might see your larger developments. Some smaller are also competitive in this space. And they receive 32.5% of that total credit, that $15.5 million I mentioned. We have a nonprofit set-aside, which is strictly for nonprofit developers. And all states do have a nonprofit set-aside because that's kind of a requirement of that tax credit program. We have a preservation set-aside, and that's to preserve affordable housing, so HUD housing, previous tax credit housing, Section 8 housing, so it's just preserving already affordable units out there. We have a rural set aside, which is 25%. That's based on USDA's rural eligibility criteria. And then we have a supportive set aside, which is 10%. And supportive means 25% of the units are made available to households experiencing or prone to homelessness. New this year, you asked about scoring, how it changes. We also added an innovative set aside cycle, which is 10%. So this was a way for us to try to get creative housing. Dane County was actually one of the innovative set aside awards this year. I can't remember the name of it, but it's very close. So it's just saying, hey, here's a creative housing idea that we have, and we're going to apply in this innovative set aside, and it was 10% of the allocation. So two projects were awarded in this set aside this last year. And then we also have the state 4%, which we said is competitive, and we take that and we put that into 3 set asides as well. So that would be a rural set aside, a small urban set aside, and a general set aside. So that's kind of how developers look at those set asides, and they figure out where they can be the most competitive and where they're able to apply. And then they make their decision to apply within those set asides. So the scoring requirements, what is that? So there is a total of 269 points available for developments. Developments need to score a minimum of 120 points to be eligible for credit. The higher the score, the better in the competitive programs, obviously. And certain set-asides, like I mentioned, are more competitive than others as they receive more applications. The general set-aside, pretty competitive. And we've also seen that rural set-aside, as we've seen more need for rural housing. We've seen a lot more applications on that rural set-aside, so it has really become one of our more competitive set-asides as well, too. Not all set-asides are eligible to score points in certain categories, and I'll talk about that in a minute. So it's really the developer. It comes to be like a numbers game to figure out how can I plan this development that meets the needs of the municipality, but also can score high enough to be competitive in this space. For the 4% credit that I mentioned that's not competitive, but developments still need to meet that minimum 120% minimum. And we do post the scoring matrix on our website, as well as the application that shows you how you can score in those categories and what's needed.
Is competitive an annual program process or?
Yep, great question. Yep, exactly. So
Once a year?
yes.
Okay.
Yep. So the state credit and the federal credit, that 9% credit, the applications cycle opened up the last week of November and closed about this first week and a half of December. So it's about 2.5 to 3 weeks that it's open. So they can't apply for those anymore. Right now we're in the process of taking all those applications, reviewing them, scoring them, and then we usually announce the winners of the credits. I would say April to May timeframe usually is when we try to get those out. Great question. So here's some scoring categories. I'm not going to go through all of them, but you can just kind of take a look at them. Of course, you know, the points, there are certain categories that have a much higher weight for scoring, but that's kind of how the breakdown shows. Like I'll draw attention to serves lowest income residents. We mentioned before the minimum threshold is like 40% of your units need to be set aside at 60% county median income or less, and that's great. We need those 60% units, but we also need 30% county median income units. So that's one of the ways that we do that is we award for having some of those 30, 40% units within that development as well. I'll kind of stop there because that was kind of a lot of information. Any questions on?
When you say small urban, what would qualify as small? We're not rural.
I believe it's under 20 or 25,000, but I can double check that for you. Good question.
Who's responsible for the annual compliance of the multifamily to make sure they're eligible for the credit each year?
Yes, Great question. So each project that's placed in service that has tax credits is assigned what we call a PMO, or Project Management Officer. They're kind of your compliance officer. So it depends. Some developers, like, I'm just going to throw out there the one that comes to my head, Impact 7, they do some tax credit developments. They're also property managers of their projects. So they manage their properties with their property management wing. But then you have other developers like North Point Development or Commonwealth, where they basically develop the property, and then through that syndication process, they get a property management firm that does that. And so annually, they do have reporting requirements that they need to submit to WIDA to show that they are renting to those households that they said they were going to rent to. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. Obviously, begs another question. What if there's non-compliance? What if, for whatever reason, the apartment complex isn't able to find the right folks to move into the apartments?
We do offer some guidance on that. So, obviously we know that things change. So there's kind of like, for example, there's the next available unit rule. So let's say that somebody's currently renting an apartment and they're at 60% county median income. So they're at that 60% rent. They get a promotion at work, which is great, but now they're at 90% county median income. So they no longer qualify for that 60% rate. They're at a market rate rental now. So there is that guidance that you're not going to evict that person, obviously. You don't want that. But the next unit that comes available would then be a 60% unit, for example. There's also some guidance that shows if the development is making its best effort to rent to certain families at certain incomes, there's a way that they can submit things. Let's say it just isn't supported by that. What I will say is most of our housing developments have a very, very low vacancy rate. Most of them at this point in time have, have waiting lists. And of course, we don't want the credits to get recaptured. The property doesn't want the credits to get recaptured. The investor doesn't. So it really is a process. And of course, there's a remedy period as well too if there is some kind of non-compliance. And I honestly don't know of any properties in Wisconsin that have had their credits recaptured. So, but and I'm sure it could happen, and I'm sure it has happened, but that's kind of the last thing that we want. So we try our best to work through those processes.
Sounds like the project manager has some leeway,
Yes.
some latitude to correct it if it does become an issue.
Yep, and they do have that compliance, person dedicated to their project that they can work through those things with to try to figure out how to remedy those situations. Good question. Yeah?
Is this a pretty defined group of developers in the state of Wisconsin? I mean, is it 5 developers, 15 developers? How many are in this space?
I don't know off the top of my head how many are in this space, but there are some, we'll say, frequent flyers that are very good at allocating credits and continue to apply for credits throughout, the various cycles. We do have caps on how many awards developers can get a year, so you don't have one developer getting 10 awards a year. But we are always looking for new developers to add to the pool. In the scoring category, on the project team, one of the kind of goals of this QAP was to get more minority developers. So we did add some additional points for a development team that has a minority co-developer or developer on there. So we're trying to work to get those new developers. It is difficult, especially in the competitive space, for brand new developers to come out the gate and get an award. But we do have some recommendations where they maybe partner with a well-established developer that's gotten tax credits, be a co-developer that way. Or start in that 4% non-competitive space and then work their way up to that 9%. But yes, great question. We do have a pretty healthy pool of developers. And we do have a list on our website of each year we post who applies for credits and then who's awarded credits, so you can see the developers that are working in that space.
Follow up to Gary's question. So frequently municipalities will have, for projects like this, scoring or points for a locally sourced. is anyone, say a developer from Arizona, eligible to participate in this?
They could, I guess it would be, I haven't seen maybe that far away. I know that we've seen some development firms that maybe are based out of Minnesota that might, try to look for opportunities in Wisconsin, or maybe Illinois developers. So it's usually closer to home. But I would say most of the developers that are getting credit are Wisconsin-based or close.
Okay. And is there any weighting factor in that regard, or no? That they're a company based in Wisconsin?
Could you restate that? I'm sorry.
Is there a weighting factor in the criteria that a company, if they're based in Wisconsin, they'd get more points, for example, than an out-of-state company, developer?
I don't believe so. I think most of the points are really based on experience and the experience they have developing affordable housing.
Okay.
So, yeah, great question though.
So with the 9, 4, and 4, are those programs typically depleted every year?
The 9%, yes. Typically, for every 2 applications we get, 1 gets an award. For the state credit, that 4% state competitive credit, same thing. I think last year, I know these numbers, I can't remember the 9%, but we had about 16 million in state credit request applications, and we awarded about a little bit over 8 million, so it was about 50-50.
So the funds that don't get used, do those carry over, or are they gone?
The funds that don't get used, so like one year, for example, we have that supportive housing set aside. We didn't get any applications in that supportive housing set aside one year. I think it was in 2019. So those credits are kind of discretionary up to WIDA what we would do with those credits. So those credits we took and we put in the rural pool and we put in the nonprofit pool to award some projects there. And then of course any other credits that are left over could be carried over to the next year, or depending on, it could go to maybe a different project, or maybe we only awarded partial credit to a project and then gave those additional credits to that project. It's really kind of that discretionary, year by year it's different. But I would say most of the time we have way more of a demand for the credit than we do actual credit. And that 4% non-competitive, it's tied to our state's bond volume cap. And I know for the last few years we haven't depleted those resources. And I don't believe they're, from the last I've heard, we don't anticipate that those resources would be depleted. Good questions. And I do have some case studies to kind of show how the math works out as well. So we also offer debt financing, and I'll mention this because a lot of our tax credit properties, not all of them, but a lot of them do have WIDA financing tied to them. We can offer fixed rate loans to multifamily developers who have set aside those affordable units. We can do loans for construction, acquisition, rehab. We do long-term fixed or variable rate financing. We do have competitive rates and fees. We do have standalone programs, so a developer, maybe they say, you know what, tax credits just aren't for me, aren't for this project, but I still want to have some kind of a WIDA financing, still seek WIDA for that. We can do that standalone, but then we also have products that are designed to complement that housing tax credit program as well. Most of our programs for financing follow the housing tax credit income limits that we said, the 20% at 50% CMI or less, 40% at 60%. But we do have some programs that can allow for higher incomes up to 80% county median income. Next slide. All right, so we'll kind of take a look at a couple different scenarios here. Excuse me. So this is Berkshire Senior Apartments in Stevens Point. These are 1 and 2 bedroom apartments, and it's a 55+ community. The amenities offered here are community space, fitness center, library, business center, with computers and Wi-Fi. This was a 4% federal and 4% state credit, which was awarded in 2019. So kind of how the credit works, developers apply for an annual credit. So for example, a developer might apply for a $100,000 annual credit. And you're like, well, that doesn't sound like a lot, that's not gonna even build me 1 unit of affordable housing, right? But that annual credit is then purchased by an investor, and they purchase that credit for 10 years. So that 100,000 is really $1 million in equity. Now that's a smaller credit amount, but I'm just making my math easy for myself today. But also the credits are usually purchased by the investor at like 89, 90, 91 cents a dollar. So the investor gets the upfront return on their investment by they're not purchasing it dollar for dollar, and plus then they get those 10 years of tax credits to do that offset. So that's kind of how the math works out. So this was a state and federal tax credit award. So I'm not sure what the math was here, but the second bullet point doesn't really work out. So that's kind of about what they got on an annual basis, and then you would take that for the federal credit, you would times that by 10, and then of course whatever the price per credit is, less that amount. I will also add, just not to muddy the water, but to throw it out there, the state credit does not have a 10-year investment period. The state credit has a 7-year or a 6-year investment period, so it doesn't quite add up to be that 10 years like the federal programs. I know there have been talks that, you know, the state may want to increase it to a 10-year investment period, but right now it doesn't have that. So that's kind of where that math works out. But still, if you're doing both the state and the federal, it's very advantageous to do them together, because then you really, instead of getting a 4% deal, when you add it with the state, it really works out to be like a 7% deal. This was 88 units, all affordable, new construction, and it also included some TIF dollars from the community. Next slide. This is Garden Terrace. This was in La Crosse, Wisconsin. This is a 50 unit, and it's a mixed income development. They have 42 affordable units, so they do have 8 market rate units in there. They have 1, 2, and 3 bedroom homes. They do have an in-unit washer dryer, handicap accessible, and extra storage. This was a 9% housing tax credit that was awarded in the 2017 cycle. They received a $683,000 annual credit. So once you invest it for the 10 years plus take away the credit price, it was about $6,150,000 in equity that was added to this development. It's a new construction development. This one also has 10 supportive units that are set aside for households experiencing homelessness. And this development also includes 15 project-based VASH vouchers, which are vouchers like Section 8 vouchers, but for veterans that are experiencing homelessness. And it also included some TIF, HUD, CDBG, and a floodplain grant. So they utilized a lot of other dollars for this development.
Rebecca, can you talk a little bit about like how a project like
This is managed, is there on-site management? I think Al was talking about that a little bit before.
Yeah, great question. This development is developed by Impact 7. So they are the developer, and they also manage this property. So they do have a on-site housing management.
But this is a great example. How many, on some of these projects, like in your capital stack, how many different players are involved typically?
Quite a few. Great question. So yeah, a lot of the projects you'll see will have your housing tax credit equity. They will have your main source of debt, which, you know, whether that's WIDA or a banking institution. But then they'll also come with some other dollars. Like I know, like Dane County affordable housing funds are used on a lot of the Dane County projects. A lot of them will have some TIF dollars. A deferred developer fee will be included in there. Some will have the, you know, HUD dollars. AHP financing. So yeah, there's some will see like 7 or 8 sources of capital within the deal. And then some you might see 3 or 4. So it all depends, but yeah, great question. And then this is Bachelor Townhomes. This was in Sparta, Wisconsin. Just to show a little different model, it's not your typical apartment complex. It's actual, looks like townhomes. These are available in 2 and 3 bedroom apartments. Community room, fitness center, in-unit washer dryer. Very, very nice development located on a lake. It's a 9%, which was awarded in 2016. It was a $373,472 annual credit, which was about $3,040,000 once you do the investment and the credit price. New construction, 32 total homes, 27 affordable, and they do have some set aside for some supportive services as well. So those were our, any questions on those?
Do you have some guideline as to what cash you're actually looking for from the developer? And I ask the question because when I see 5% cash in by the developer, the rest comes from credits and grants and all this other money, and then if the developer set up their own construction company, they can create whatever invoices they want, so there's profit built in there. Is there a guideline for what percent of developer equity you're looking for?
We do, and we do have guidelines and caps on developer fees, on what they can actually charge for their fee portion of it. As far as other funding sources comes in, I mean, I know at the time of application, we're looking for 80% committed funds. And your committed funds could be your housing tax credit equity and like your fixed term debt, like your WEDA debt or something like that. But I can't remember off the top of my head what the developer needs to bring to the table, but a lot of times what they're contributing is that deferred developer fee. If that helps answer your question.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah. And we do have guidelines on, I believe they have to, there's like by year 6, they have to have that kind of paid back to them. So here's just some of our impact. I won't read through the whole thing. And we do have all of this on our website as well. And our annual report typically comes out first, the first portion of the year. And the next slide. And engaging with us. Here's our map, like we said, our territory, and that lovely green shade there. I do have some business cards. Other things that I didn't necessarily mention this afternoon is that we do single-family lending as well. So we work with financial institutions to implement our single-family products. So if an individual is looking for a home to purchase, they can go to a bank or credit union that offers WEDA loan, and they can get those loans. We do have reduced pricing for first-time home buyers, for veterans, so it's a pretty great program. Unlike the tax credit program, where typically the renter in that space is going to be your 60% county median income household, sometimes 80%. Our mortgage loans can usually go up to 120 to 140% county median income for our income limit. So it really, really opens it up for the range of who can get a WEDA mortgage loan.
Question, so when you use the CMI for kind of that benchmark, in the state law regarding the creation of the affordable housing funds, it says 30% of, and it's sort of ambiguous, of area, we've had a discussion about what that means. Is county median pretty much the standard that you found for whether it's at the state level, the county level, the local level, versus communities trying to figure out what their own 30% threshold is?
Yes, great question. Yeah, typically it goes by county median income on our programs at least, to make it easier for communities, developers to just kind of take a look at, the county, whether it's Dane, Brown, La Crosse, look at what those income levels are. So each year we do publish, and we get that information from the HUD. So each year we publish on our website our kind of income breakdown that says, hey, if you're in, this county, here's what a 30% household makes based on household size. Here's what you can charge for rent for that household based on bedroom size. And then we go all the way through, so then we'll list our 40, our 50, and our 60. So, and we don't see a ton of change year over year, but you never know what happens year over year. So I think we're still working with the last year's income limits. They haven't been updated yet because we haven't gotten them yet. Any other questions? That was a lot of information.
That was really good. Good job.
So I can send out links to, you know, the QAP to kind of take a look at some of those pages and things like that. But yeah, if any of you want to have an additional conversation, or maybe just have some questions about different little things, maybe get some more case studies, you know, certain sizes that you're looking for, types of housing, so if you're looking for more family, more senior, you know, I can of course always find those examples and, you know, get those out to you and answer any questions that you have.
Well, thanks very much for,
Yeah.
before I mean, obviously, Chris, if you want to grill Rebecca or any of you others before she leaves.
Can I just ask her a question? I don't want to grill you.
It's happened before.
No, I think this is absolutely great information. Is this something that is shared with us, that we can have this presentation?
Yeah, of course.
We've got it already, so.
You have it?
Yep.
So, Tim, if you don't, please share with us, but also share with the village board,
Mm-hmm.
so they've got the information.
Yeah, definitely. And I did leave some of my cards over on the table as well, so if anybody wants to contact me that way, definitely feel free, but always open to conversations. Yeah.
Rebecca, it seems like one of our issues here is just land pricing. I mean, for affordable housing, our land costs are so high here, and maybe that's common throughout the state, but that's always been a tough hurdle for us.
Yeah, land is one of those things, and is it land with infrastructure included in it, and water, sewer? Okay. And, you know, that is attractive to developers. You know, I have a lot of rural areas, and there is a lot of land out there, and it's not that expensive, but then if the developer finds out, oh gosh, I gotta get water, I gotta get sewer, I gotta get roads, I mean, that's a huge, huge cost. And of course, the municipalities don't have a lot of funds to pay for it, developers don't want to pay for it, so then it just doesn't happen. But yeah, land cost is something that can, you know, we've seen, of course, you know, TIF districts be created, or, you know, land being donated as part of the community investment into affordable housing, but it is a challenge.
Thanks.
Thank you so much for coming tonight.
Yes, thank you so
That was
much as
really
well. And we do have a counterpart that works with single-family lending, so if you ever want, I think she lives right here in the area, so if you ever want somebody to come in and talk about kind of single-family lending, we can do that as well.
Great, thanks.
All right.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you all so much.
Thank
It was
you.
great to meet you. Have a good evening.
All right, you too. Yeah, so that was, I was gonna conclude with that remark, that we got this information from Rebecca, and we have it, and be happy to distribute it, as PDF or PowerPoint.
You can get out that way.
Oh, I can? Okay.
Yep, just go right away left.
Alarm to sound off on your end. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Rebecca.
Okay, next, we have reports. Tim?
All right, a few updates. Let's see, there's an update regarding KID 10. First of all, I'd like to apologize kind of for the start and stop nature of it. Our target start is looking like March. We actually, staff have a meeting with DOT tomorrow afternoon to get some more information. We've talked about some of the costs associated with specifically the intersection improvements at Hogan and 19 as kind of being a holding point. So hopefully we'll have some more information from that meeting tomorrow. And then hopefully Ellers will be able to get the project plan out next month, have some time to review, and then initiate things in March. So that's looking like the target timeline for now. But we don't want to start calling and get schedules to just reel it back again. So we want to have this a little bit more buttoned up before we do that. Next update, just a note about on your meeting agenda. It says at the bottom, next scheduled meeting February 15th. The way the calendar works for February and March, the third Tuesday is actually a joint plan commission night. So that means we're gonna have to domino both the February and March meeting to those Wednesdays, which would be the 16th. So it wouldn't be the 15th, so just want to at least get that out there and ask if you have your calendars in front of you, if you know of any conflicts on those two Wednesdays. Don't need an answer right now, but again, just want to let you know of those date changes. And then another update, and this was, I think, Al, this was you who asked this at one of the last meetings. What do we have in our fund balance, and what might we have? So this is a huge, the table that is on the screen as well as is in your packet is an attempt to answer that question. And for those, any of those either listening this evening or watching, this is extremely hypothetical. So this is, don't take this as this is what is happening. So a lot of caveats with this. The only thing that we know for sure is under the first row, which is the extension of TID 2, which produced about $510,000 in increment. 326, roughly, thousand was used for the Cohen Esri project, which of course is under construction on Main Street, leaving a balance of 183,669. And what I did then in the second two, or the last two columns, is break that out into a 75-25%, in anticipation of what I would think would be, based on conversation that, per the state law, up at least 75% of those funds could be used for affordable housing, 25 to improve housing stock, and that's, a little bit more, or a little less defined. So I broke it out that way in anticipation of what that would look like. And then just going down the list, so these are in more chronological order. So the next potential TID that could close is TID 4. And if everything works out and the stars align and so forth, and the village board says, yes, let's in fact extend that for a year, that would result in a new increment of $112,000 approximately. So when you add that to the balance, the current balance of 183, that results in the 295 that's shown in the middle column. Then same thing, split that 75-25, and then likewise just did that for the next few TIDs, and in working with our finance director Renee. Rather than carry this out, 30 or 40 years, we don't know what's going to happen. The other thing to factor into this is that this assumes the village will not spend a penny on any new projects. So this is just looking at if we simply extended those TIDs and didn't allocate any of those funds to projects in those given years, that is what a potential affordable housing fund could look like, again, if no other expenditures were made. So that at least gives you an idea of the maybe, right? So one of the things I guess I'd call your attention to is TID 3. Projected closure year and the final closure year of 2023, you'll see those are the same. And by the way, this information comes from our financial consultant, Ellers. So my understanding, and Chris and Gary, you may have obviously more experience with this, but if a projected closure year and final closure year are the same, there may be, I'll say, more hesitancy to extend that. If there's that gap between essentially, closing a TID early, then there may be more receptiveness to extending that TID. Those are all variables. Again, I'm not saying one's good or bad or anything. I'm just saying that there's a number of variables. But under those assumptions, if all these TIDs were extended and no other expenditures by 2027, 28, we'd have about $3.5 million in the pot, so to speak.
So just to
So-
clarify, Tim, a second, okay.
Go ahead.
If the TID was extended, it doesn't extend the time to expend any, to make any expenditures, but it would be to be able to spend the money would be 3 and 6.
I'm not sure I follow you, but
When you're talking about the decision whether or not to extend by a year,
oh, right.
does it also extend the expenditure time period? Or
Uh,
just the ability to use the funds?
No, I think what it does is essentially it closes it keeps that TID open, and those dollars, all those dollars essentially go
Okay.
into that
Okay, that's,
pool.
want to make sure, okay.
So Tim, I have a math question.
Oh, you're asking the wrong guy.
Wait,
Go ahead.
what did you do for a living?
So if I take 75% of 510,269, that says that the 75 portion is 382,702, of which Cohen Ezra used 326,600, which means 56,102 is left for the 75% affordable housing portion. The rest is for the 25%, roughly 127,567.
Okay, so maybe my intent was to use the 183 amount.
I agree with the 183.
Yep, so the
I
balance.
don't agree with the allocation.
So, yeah, I guess I'll have to go back and do the math if you think that's not correct.
You'd have to take 25% of the 510 is what you're saying, right? Al?
Yes, correct, yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
See that, Tim? So you have to use 25% of the 510.
Oh, right, but
You took
right,
it looks
right,
like
in
you
my,
took
in my
25.
calculation, though, I just used the remaining balance,
Yes.
not the beginning
Right.
balance. Yeah.
Right. And the only reason I asked the question, one, because I want to make sure we're doing it the right way. Second, because obviously that says we have $127,567 left for non-affordable housing.
That's correct.
We don't have to spend on affordable housing,
Right.
not,
We can use it for affordable
Yeah.
housing
Correct,
still.
yes. Yep,
But we
yep.
could use it for other things too.
Correct, yes.
not on affordable housing.
Getting back to your comment about if we decide to go with the program for redevelopment or improvements to existing homes, that would give us a little more flexibility.
As opposed to redevelopment, I'll say rehab.
You know, whatever, Chris, you're the boss.
No, that's not true. I'm just, so Tim, we just need to change that chart then to reflect that. Okay, for the record. And Al, good catch on that to point it out.
I don't think Tim's convinced yet. That's okay.
No, I'll relook at it.
Yeah, that's fine.
Tim, do you understand what we're saying? You got it?
On the base
For your
amount.
calculations? Yeah, so you take your 510, and all we're saying is that 75% of that 510 had to go towards affordable housing. 25% of that 510 goes into the improved housing stock.
Yep, right, yep, yep,
And right now, it's, you just took it off of the 183,
correct, yep.
so. Okay. Other questions or comments about that?
No, this is good, though.
Okay?
Did that, for either Al or others, did that help in at least painting a picture of what is a possible
Yes, it
scenario?
For me, it does, yes.
Okay. All right, let's see, I think that's all I had really in my report in terms of updates. So with that, I guess I'd like to move on to the old business and continue discussion of potential policies, and just lead off with a summary of what was included in the packet was the Waukesha Policy. So as you may remember, we've looked at guidelines from other communities, including Milwaukee, Janesville, La Crosse, Prairie du Chien, and then Waukesha. I'm not going to say that their policies are necessarily good or bad, but I did think that in terms of the skeleton of a policy document, I thought this was good. Not necessarily, again, where the dollars are going, you'll all decide that, but I thought that this, the framework of this could be a good thing to use as a next step in providing something for you to react to. But we'll need a little bit more meat on the bone. So I just wanted to go through quickly what theirs is, and they break it down into two pieces. One, affordable housing, a rehabilitation program, and then affordable housing development fund. And they define those. So for example, the affordable housing, the rehabilitation program, they've got kind of a purpose statement. And in both of the program areas, for this community, they seem to want to target more, and I bolded this, owner-occupied housing stock. Again, not saying it's good or bad, but that's the direction they seem to be going. So this particular piece, and this I would say would fall into what we would call our 25%. So this program would be used to improve existing affordable owner-occupied housing stock. and to increase and improve the supply of affordable owner-occupied units. And then within their policy document, they identify programs, or the program specifics that relate to the loan amounts, applicant eligibility, approval process, property eligibility, loan fund guidelines, and loan monitoring. So having that in a document, I thought was very good, so that when someone comes in, or an applicant, a developer, et cetera, this really helps to say, okay, these are our criteria, if you will, in helping to meet, decide, this body decide whether they should receive any funding. One clarification on this one, and thanks, Catherine, she actually caught this. I did too, but she called this out right away. And that is, on Waukesha's program, there's a statement at the bottom of page 1 that I think is really not correct. They say at least 25% of TIF affordable housing extension funds must be improved, or must be used to improve housing stock. Program will start out using the 25%, with the understanding the council, upon recommendation by the redevelopment authority, can increase program funding based on demand. That's really not true. So I have included the excerpt from state statute that says, at least, it's sort of the flip side. The city shall use, or a municipality shall use at least 75% of the increments to benefit affordable housing. You could use more, you could use all of it, but you can't use more than 25 to go the other way. So I just wanted to point that out, just with that particular piece.
And I caught that too, Tim, but could this be a hybrid between the two?
Was the one thing I said.
In other words, this could fall into either bucket. If in fact we are lending money to someone who fits into the 30% of, seeing all these fancy
Yep,
numbers
yep.
you guys throw around all the time. If someone fits into that category, does that then possibly comes out of the 75% pool?
Oh, for affordable, if it meets the criteria of affordable, yes. Yeah.
Or if this was specific to the rehab program versus a multifam. I guess that's where I was wondering the same thing, if that was.
So I think, yeah, and I imagine we'll be, talking about this in more detail in successive meetings. But if it's for affordable housing, I think then it qualifies, and I'll say under that 75%. So if it's for a rehab or a new project, if it's for affordable, then you're still meeting that affordable test, if you follow me.
Yeah, I just looked because the title says Affordable Housing Rehab Program, which affordable may be somewhat misleading perhaps a little bit.
Yeah, we should come up with a different word, so
Yeah.
we don't keep getting confused with this.
Yeah,
Um,
because I can see where it can go both ways. Someone, I could ask for the money, and assuming my house met the criteria, I'd be eligible for the money. Now, do I need it? Probably not. But someone else might, and they meet the affordable criteria. So that's where it could be a hybrid, and that's where I was confused too by those sentences, but that's how I rationalized it.
Okay. Yeah, so they, again, depending on how you set it up, how you allocate those dollars, it could, the way it's defined, fall in either or both of those
Right.
categories. Let's see, so again, this one for the housing development program, again, for Waukesha, they're focusing at smaller scale residential redevelopment that increase affordable, and here's the key for them, owner-occupied housing stock, eliminate blight, create new affordable housing units, et cetera. And then they've got criteria for eligible use of funds, land acquisition, site preparation, housing planning activities, and smaller grants or low-interest loans. And then in addition, they have specified items for the requirement for the use of funds. Applications would be reviewed by staff, approved by their CDA. And then funding priority, and here again, they really call out owner-occupied units as a priority. Now, they do mention rental, however, rental occupied housing where the income levels are above 80 CMI, required for the Housing Authority, or the Housing Development Action Grant Program, that's theirs, but below county median income. So they came up with that criteria, and then again, so the next one, development projects involving creating and renovating rental units targeted to households at or below 80 CMI would be directed to that HODAG problem, or program. Let's see, and then
It
lastly.
seems like there's one word in there, or two words in there that would be, I don't know how you define that, it's actually blight. Because it says it's required to eliminate blight.
The TIF requirement, statutory.
Is there something official that requires something to be?
Is it-
In the TIF statute, what is that, 66-1105, there is a general description of blight, because
Okay.
that's an actual type of TID, is a blighted TID.
Okay.
And then again, so requirement for the use of the funds, there's some other criteria here. So again, my point in bringing this up, I just want to go through this quickly, not again for debate over these specific things, but I thought what they did in terms of laying out criteria was good relative to some of the other communities we've looked at. And I thought it was fairly straightforward to use. Here's program A, program B, and the criteria and so forth. Is that something that seems like you would be interested in if I were to start to create a document for Waukesha that looked like that? Obviously, there's gonna be a lot of missing pieces in there, but am I on the right track in assuming this, to you at least, seems like a good path? Or I can certainly, research other communities and see what they're doing with their programs.
So this is about a year in right now for them. Is that based on the 2021 February 18th?
Yep.
Do we know, did they have to hire staff to take care of this?
Good question. I think they do have a larger staff, and I think, Al, you may have brought this to, how programs like these are administered. I actually spoke to Renee about that, had that question today, and say, hey, if we were to do this.
You know it's tax season, right? Probably not a good time to ask her that
She gave me
question.
5 minutes. She thought that initially this probably wouldn't be that big a deal. However, with our new hires, their duties are pretty well set, and it depends on how quickly those funds were to be built up and used. So if the pool was large enough and the demand was large enough, we may have to go to probably an outside source for administration. So there'd be some cost associated with that. But it's a little hard to tell right now because we don't know the demand, because reverse engineering, we don't know what that amount of money is or what the specific policy is. If it turns out that there's, only for the first 2 or 5 years or something, only 4 projects that are recipients, well, that wouldn't be that difficult to administer internally. But
No, I was gonna ask Tim, to that regard, because I like the blend of the owner occupied and then that kind of the new housing stock that would be able to accommodate mixed affordable and market rate housing. But I think in your I don't know if it's just in your plans, and whether it's if you have a historic preservation plan, if you have an inventory of houses that are over X number of years old, I can imagine there's you know which ones are more than 100 years old, right? So there's a priority list that could be kind of somehow, however this is written, prioritized, essentially, so maybe it wouldn't be such a burden? Because I hear you, that it could be.
So Waukesha actually did have a 50-year threshold in there that a house had to be at least 50 years old to be eligible. But in that case, I think in most cases they were owner-occupied homes.
Right.
And maybe you want to limit it to that, maybe you don't, I don't know, that's obviously future discussion. But that was how they did it that was their cutoff, so 50 year older. But maybe to your point, Tricia, is, you know, a 75-year-old home gets more points, or a 100-year-old home gets the most points, or something like that. Is that kind of?
Yeah,
what
because
you were-
I live in a super old home in the 1940s, right? But I wouldn't consider myself like on the priority list for this. I would think it would be older than that, you know, just thinking like historic. I don't know, I don't think 1940s is
That's
historic. Maybe
great
I
stuff
think
for
it's
you all
younger,
to discuss.
but-
Is there a way in Waukesha here to look at and say how many home occupied or home occupied homes that are over 50 years old? Is it, because a lot of these, I mean, from what I've seen in
It's actually
Waukesha
pretty
recently,
I don't have the breakdown of home occupied, but I have the breakdown of number of homes, and I apologize, this is not my best work if you want to see this.
oh,
Thanks.
Really?
The number is the number of homes, and then there's the percentage based on your current, and this is 2019 ACS data. I apologize, I don't have enough.
That's fine.
Go ahead, that's all right.
And I was actually pointing back to Sam, because
Oh,
I
I'm
know
sorry.
he's interested or is working with a group of folks that would like to undertake that effort to inventory and come up with some type of historic preservation. So I think there's a way, yeah, this is estimates, but they're probably fairly close.
'cause one thing at least people I know in town, you know, these homes, when they come up for sale, they're gone in a couple days. They're getting bought up as rentals. They're not gonna be, you know, owner occupied, a lot of them. I don't know how you prevent that from happening. But I'd be interested to see what that trend is, and then maybe a realtor in town could tell us that fairly quickly. I just don't know, but that's what I hear on the street.
And at the end of the day, if you're looking at a municipal investment and your ROI is on the property tax return, you know, you want to benefit the owner, right? Like, it's just-
Right.
we just want to. But at the end of the day, it's what comes back to the
And
village.
these people who are buying these, you know, for rentals, you know, financially, they don't need any help. They're, you know, they're flowing money just fine, so it's
Investment.
difficult to try to understand.
They are, but are they fixing them up? I always wonder, I
Isn't
always
that
worry
fix
about
up?
that with rentals, like, are they buying an older home and then not replacing a furnace or not putting a new roof on and just kind of milking it for the
Yes.
money?
See, I don't know that either. I
and then
don't know
degrading
that,
the
but,
properties more, yeah.
I would ask if there's a village ordinance that prevents me from buying a home and converting that to rental.
Mm-mm.
No? No?
unless there's a covenant, which there isn't in any of the older parts of Waukesha, I don't think.
So if you want a visual of the 50-year-old and above, it's really 4th Street on this side of town now, so here's Q. 4th Street up to Holiday, Holiday out to Woodland, basically, and then across now here,
Yeah.
on your 2nd, 3rd, all the way pretty much to Division Street, is gonna be where that, and then where the water tower, old water tower, where the water tower hill is, that section right there. That's gonna be your housing that is in that age category. And then you got all the subdivisions that have come around those, that are gonna be less than 50 years old.
But from an IT standpoint, having served on the board of review for 20-some years, it's all electronics as to when each home was built. And through a data sort, you might be able to get that through some IT person that can data sort that kind of stuff.
Absolutely. I think generally, though, that's where the houses are gonna be found, that are gonna be over 50 years right now.
So being someone that moved into Wanakee as a renter, now I own my own home, do you want to discourage that? I think if it's an investment that's going into the property and it's valid, that's where I have a little bit of concern about like disseminating, like, I think if the property warrants it and it's going into something that's part of the property, it adds to the value of the home, it adds to the value of the neighborhood. I think that's what's most important, just in my personal opinion, like I said, came to Wanakee as a renter because I couldn't afford to buy a home when I first came here, but now I do. And it was that kind of a home that I was driven to. I love the neighborhood and I love that area. And so as we can keep those properties up and we get kind of the teachers and the police, you know, like that's, I don't want to necessarily say that owner versus renter is better or worse. But I think that the value of the properties and keeping that character of the neighborhoods is the more important outcome.
I agree, and for relocating families in particular, a single-family home rental is often what they're looking for, not an apartment. while they're looking to get established. And with the shortage of homes, and my boss at work has been in a rental for almost 2 years now because they just cannot find a house that fits their budget. And, you know, he's a PhD and she's an RN, they make great money.
When you say a rental, you
they-
mean like a multifamily complex or?
They're in a single-family rental.
Okay.
Yeah, and chose there, 'cause they don't live in Wanakee, they would have liked to, but could not find a single-family home to rent here, and they knew that they would be in one at least a year while they're looking. And they have 3 kids, active in sports, and they're like, we can't put them in an apartment. Our neighbors would hate us, and it would drive them all crazy. So yeah, those single-family home rentals, if they're older, I agree with you, it's the property that needs to be cared for. Great if that's a homeowner, but great if that's a renter too. I think we should be a little bit agnostic on that.
So
Yeah.
in the end, if we're trying to improve the housing stock, you know, do we say to guys who wanna flip homes, hey, if you come in here and flip this and keep it a single-family home, we'll help you do that. I don't care what your income level is, but if you'll improve this housing stock and flip it in a couple of years, are we getting what we want? We've got a home that's updated, a new roof, a new furnace, it's an updated home. That's what we want. But is this guy gonna turn around and sell it at an
That's the question I
affordable
would have.
price?
That's the question I would have. If they're gonna come and flip it, they're flipping it for a reason, and that's to be
They're
profitable.
flipping it to make money, you know, that's.
So that
You
affordable
can
house
have
may.
clawbacks in that, though.
Yeah.
Like,
Say that
you can,
again?
you can have
Yes, I can.
clawbacks in that. They can't flip it.
Sure, I'm just saying what
Yeah,
you,
I agree with
how
you.
you described it is,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
not what,
I don't-
but
Yeah.
we don't wanna lose what affordable housing we have,
Right.
to that,
It's-
so.
And to the point of the homeowner that wants to invest in the house, have it a, equal playing field, like
Okay.
And I think that's the difficult part in my mind is
yeah.
people that want an affordable house, that come to the community to look for one.
Yeah.
It's such a competitive market, you know, they think the house, gosh, I could buy this for 200,000, but the market's gonna take it to 250, just because it's gonna be competitive. How do we help these people get into that house? I mean, that's what we're trying to do, I think,
Yeah.
but how do you do that?
That's why, in part of what I would do is then come up with a laundry list of all the programs we've seen thus far within our group here, of one of which is assistance with down payment of a house. That could be one of the answers. Now, assistance is either in the form of a grant or in the form of a loan, but in any event, that could be one of the things we offer. But I think we probably need, and I can go back and do it too, but a laundry list of all the programs we've seen, not that that's all encompassing, but at least that we've seen enough right now where we have a lot of ideas on the board as to what we could be doing. But I don't have a good enough memory to recall them all. But that's, I think we need to backtrack a little bit and figure out, okay, what is everybody else doing? And then does that meet our criteria of what you're trying to accomplish?
And one of those that seems like is frequently used is a 0% interest loan for like down payment assistance, or even for home repairs, renovations. That seems many communities do that versus grants, because then it's obviously, if it's grants, the money's gone. And
But you have to understand, I understand on the down payment where the money's gone, but at a home improvement or rehab or whatever the term is you want to use, if we grant someone 10 grand, they put that into the house, the value of the home goes up, real estate taxes go up, and we get the money back. It's no different than TIF,
No.
same concept.
So I think that if you want to formulate an agreement around that and just make it feel right? There's a period of time where rent maybe can't be above X or something like that, whatever the market rate is at the time that you put the agreement in place. If someone wants to flip a house and make a ton of money, they just won't take the program.
Yeah.
Right? Like, it's one, where it's like for legitimate, hold on to this and help us out for 5 years. Some creative options that.
Yeah, and you could if it's so much less than 5, you put interest on it, more than 5, the interest is forgiven. I mean, there's all kinds of things you can do with the programs to help get away from some of the people who are utilizing the money for their own personal benefits.
Right.
So I understand all that, that's fine. But I want to get back to the original question, and that is, do we got to hire someone to monitor it and implement and all this?
That was the original.
I was just thinking it when you were saying we could have this, or we could do it this way or this way, and who's gonna monitor that?
So, one of the question I would have is, and part of the reason why I was arguing for the 127,567, the 25% of the 510, if you can keep up with those numbers, is because doesn't the 127,567 then give us money to hire someone? Can we use that money to hire someone to administer the program, number one? Number two, if that person does their appropriate cost allocations, says, you know what, I spend 40% of my time on affordable and 57% of my time, whatever the percent is, on non-affordable, then we allocate it that way. So can we use administrative costs to come out of those?
I think the answer is qualified, yes, but it's probably easier if it comes out of the non-affordable bucket, because then it's just sort of this generic money's used to improve housing stock. I think it's a debate then to say, okay, we're going to set aside TIF dollars to help affordable housing, but those dollars are going to administrative costs. Is that really, I mean, to what extent is that really benefiting affordable housing stock per se? Again, that's a debate,
Right.
but I think to do it the other way, to pull it out of that other 25%, there's no debate. It's just, we've got this pool, and it says we can use it to help improve the housing stock. Now, it doesn't matter if it's the affordable threshold, it's just, by doing that, by purposefully having an administrator or whatever entity to do that and use those funds, I think it's much more easily rationalized.
And that's fine. I'm just trying to think how you package it. And obviously, you're just playing with dollars and money. You're throwing it from one pocket to the next pocket. And I know there's a lot more to it than that. But the fact is that, yes, I think your answer was yes, we can take administrative expenses out of that money to administer the program. So when it comes to someone saying, hey, now you're hiring someone else, yeah, but this person was hired out of this money and this is where it came from. You're going to specifically identify and track that person's time and efforts to that particular program and source of funds.
I think it would be easier in a situation where if the village were to hire I'll just throw out Ellers just because that's our financial consultant, not necessarily Baker Tilly, whomever. And it'll, I think, be much easier to see, the receipts, if you will, from the work versus if it were a part-time person hired by the village and now they're part-time doing clerical work on whatever and other, but they're spending some time working on administering the affordable housing program. I think that'd be much more difficult. I mean, it's possible, but I just think that would be.
Yeah, and I understand that. I guess, we should think about that, but I think I understand the concept now, and as long as I understand the concept, we'll figure out the detail later on as to whether it's a employee of the village or a subcontractor or a CPA firm or who might be able to do it at a reasonable price that can justify and do what we have to get done. But there will be a compliance factor to this, and that's ultimately what we're getting at, whatever program we come up with.
And that's, so let's say that's $125,000 we have sitting there. I mean, this would cost us $50,000 just to administer it every year. Right, then you have somebody and their benefits, and you take that piece and you say, so.
Yeah, but I think Tim's response to that, I couldn't speak for Tim, but I guess my response, from what I heard from Tim is, okay, let's subcontract that out to someone. Let's find someone who's gonna charge a reasonable price, and it's per engagement.
Yeah.
So one house comes and this person now says, okay, I'll charge $200 to do what I gotta do to get it done.
So you're in a catch-22 there then, in my opinion, because you're looking at putting a program out there that you want people to use, but you're limiting it by how much you're gonna be able to have for usage with the hires that you're gonna have, or you're doing it on a per cost basis. I see there's just, that's one here, as you go through that. And I'll just say, I learned from John Lubmeyer, he didn't hire anybody in his term across the village. And we've hired 7 or 8 new employees in that absolutely has an impact on the budget. Not necessarily the first year, but as they keep getting and growing with their incomes and their benefits and all the other things that go with it. So it's hard to say, all right, we're gonna allocate 50,000 or whatever it might be for expense of that. I'm trying to figure out how we can run this through the finance department with what they have. And that's more than a 5-minute conversation with Renee to see what ramifications that would be. And we kind of learn during the first year if they can handle it. And that's what we gotta find out, is if they can handle it, because we can implement it that way. And if we see, all right, we're having this massive usage, there's not enough time on that, now we gotta figure it out.
And I'm
At that
agreeing with
point.
that. I agree with you, Chris.
I think, wouldn't it go with an entire business case to whatever program we come up with and however it lays out? It's almost too early to determine that, because at some point you have to figure out what is the ROI of these investments on X development, these investments on this, however it comes, and then project it from a property tax perspective and a revenue, and then work it backwards and justify it from that. Like it's just kind of an overall, right, like any other investment that you would make. What is the cost in, cost out?
Yeah, go ahead, Gary.
In my mind, an easy area to at least look at to start this is, elderly people that are in a home. I mean, people that are on Social Security trying to stay in their house. It's a struggle for all of them. And when they do get a roof or a furnace or whatever that is, that's where they really struggle. I mean, how do you identify those people in the community and get a basic program out there? At least we'd get something out there going and maybe target it towards, a segment that is kind of controlled and we understand it a little bit. I don't know.
I think you're right in going to one area, but I also look at it and flip that. So you have your seniors that are really in good shape, and then you have your families who are just getting by, barely scraping through with, 3, 4 kids at the lowest end of housing, and what about them? They may need some assistance too with that house that's 50, 75, 100 years old that they could afford to get, and all of a sudden their furnace is out. Well, that's not so good, especially today, right? I mean, so you look at how do we balance all of that? And there's only so many dollars,
Yeah.
within that. Is it gonna be loans? Is it gonna be grants for those things?
So-
First-time buyer, I agree. If we can get a first-time buyer program or down payment program, I think that would be huge for us. Maybe we define it with types of workers. You have healthcare workers, you have teachers, you have police. You talked about a lot of the people that struggle with that downstroke to get the house. Those are the areas that we could target if we wanted to for that type of program. Just throwing it out there. It's
And
a good idea.
that's where we had the one program, and I don't remember all the details again of the gentleman who was here, who gave that program, and I would have put a nonprofit. So I'd get the employers to kick in a contribution to the nonprofit, and then that helps, and this money, 127 goes into that nonprofit, and that's what uses then for the down payment, and then the employers have a vested interest in making sure that employees get here and can live here.
Which is kind of, I know you were gonna say, which is where I was kind of going with that. So if we have a down payment, and I'll use Jeff, your business, for example. If you need a CNA and they want to live here, maybe it's Jeff as the employer is kicking in part of what, maybe a matching fund or some sort of fund to help that employee with that initial
It was
payment.
2 weeks ago in the State Journal, there was a story about hiring difficulties, and I didn't follow up with the reporter, but there are companies in the Madison area that are doing that incentive for down payments.
Yeah, which could be a
And providing
partnership.
a loan process that they need to stay so many years with you, and if you leave before that, here's what happens. So there's loan agreements that, that's where it started to block me. I don't know that I can do that by myself to
Right.
figure out how much attorney fees I'd have to pay to try to get the right loan agreement written. But there are people that are doing that, and I think if you had it in a pooled sort of way, it might even be more attractive, because you'd have somebody to administer it, which
Mhm.
is back to Al's original point. It's gonna take somebody to administer.
It's a partnership. That's what I'm getting at. It's a partnership with those employers. The employers could be kicking in for that administrative fee. that we'd have to pay.
Yeah, see, and the reason I use a nonprofit is because if Jeff gives one of his employees money for a down payment of the house, putting a loan aside, that's compensation. Whereas if he puts it in the nonprofit, he gets the tax deduction, a charitable contribution, and then the nonprofit pays or works it. And if it's a payback or no payback, whatever the program is, Jeff doesn't have to worry about what's going in the W-2 and not in the W-2. Because now it becomes the responsibility of the nonprofit. That's why I threw that in there. Gets complex.
You went into the accountant part of your, I got it right away.
Can I make a
Go ahead,
comment?
Go ahead.
We have this conversation every single meeting.
We do.
And Gary, you advocate for the older folks. You always bring up the money, Al. You're always finding alternatives, Tricia. You're always talking about we need people to be able to afford to live in the community that work here. And if David Kennedy was here, he'd make a comment about, I'm not sure if we should be using median income. And you guys can tell me what comment I would make. We have this conversation every time, and the pattern of the conversation seems to go is that we get a new piece of information and we learn something, and now we're all turning it over and we're filing that and processing that information. That's all from a group process, really great. But I'm wondering if we're to the point where we should bring in a facilitator, and we should go back to a point that you guys made a little bit earlier. Maybe we need all of our options. Here are all the things that we've learned, laid out on I'm a flip chart person, so a flip chart. And then maybe we as a group need to talk about what is our first priority, our second priority, our third priority. What does a good outcome look like, and what does a bad outcome look like? I guess we'd all say a bad outcome would look like we're the community that all the flippers come to and drive our housing prices up to. If we can maybe kind of agree on that, I think that we're gonna start to see solutions pretty quickly, because we have learned a lot over the last 5 or 6 months. And I think we've got some great ideas. Are we at that point where we can maybe put those ideas into some policies, and then once we get the policy kind of roughed out, then we'll have an idea of, do we need somebody to facilitate it? What does it look like? And I'm wondering if once we have a policy roughed out a couple months from now, maybe we go to the Dane County Housing Authority and we say, so here's what we're looking at doing. Who else does this, and how do they pay for it to be done? Who's administering it out there? They might have, I can't talk with these darn things on. Well, Lord, like losing my breath as I'm talking. But they might have some names of consultants or firms that are doing this, or kind of co-op that's going on. They might have some solutions for us. Would that be something I can recommend? And if we want to facilitate it ourselves, we can do it. I can also recommend an outside facilitator, Sharon Lesberg, who did our, co-facilitated the housing task force, is really good at keeping us on task. And she'd probably be more than interested in coming in and helping us along. I don't know, what would that sound like as an idea?
Very effective
Okay.
facilitator.
Yeah, she's great. She'll have us flip charts and post-it noting everything.
You're right, we end up coming back, we all have our
Yeah.
thoughts, and we have great ideas.
And they're,
This administrative cost, maybe Waukesha can help us out a little bit to say,
Yeah.
hey, what do you, is this 20,000 a year, or is it 80,000 a year? I mean, we start looking at, we have to qualify for income. Well, who's gonna look into that person's financial background? Does the bank already have that, or is that something that you're gonna have to spend time with? I mean, all of a sudden you start looking at the complexity of this, and it's like, let's not make it that way, but I don't know how you prevent it.
Well, it's in Waukesha's policy that says you can't 30% of income, and then defines what that 30% is made up of. So someone's gonna go through and add pay stubs and then get the mortgage payment and the real estate taxes and the insurance, utilities, add it all up, and there's gotta be compliance on it.
However, I guess, to the flip side of that is, in order to get a cost estimate, I would imagine the first question someone would ask is, okay, show me your program. And we're not gonna get a good estimate of what it's gonna cost to administer a program if we don't have any policies in place. To Kristen's
Yeah.
point, I think that's a good
Have it
next
roughed out.
step. But ultimately, we're getting now to the point of, you all are gonna have to start making some decisions about what are the priorities. So for example, I hammered on what Waukesha did. It seemed like one of their big priorities was owner-occupied housing. That was very evident to me anyway, in reading their document. Maybe that's a priority for you. We haven't taken a vote, or, those kinds of things. So I think to start weeding down those points of, these are the priority items, then we can start populating the policy document, and then I think if, to ask someone, what would it cost to administer this? Now we have something for them to react to. Because if we don't have any policies in place, they're gonna go, come back to me when you have a program. In my opinion, I don't think that we're gonna get a realistic answer of cost until we have something more fleshed out. So I'd be totally open if you've got some names, Kristen.
I do,
We can,
yeah.
we can start down that path if that suits the body.
Mhm. I've got some people that owe me some favors, so, for facilitating, so.
Questions at what cost?
So I agree with Kristen. One, we should have a facilitator. It might be me, because she named all of you for input that you've given, and she didn't even take a talk about me. She even named the guy who's not here. So,
No, and it's good, I mean, these are all, like, we all have our things that we're focused on, and that's why we're a well-rounded group. Those are all very good things.
so,
Yeah.
and I agree that if we had a chart, that as we're going through all this, and you can probably just go to the tape, Tim, and say, here's the things that you guys have all stated that you're interested in, and have that laid out for us. I mean, not that I'm saying we don't need a facilitator, don't take it that way, but I think that you could do that pretty simply, and then we can just start going through and say, that's our priority. That's number 2, number 3, and come to consensus that way. Because that's really
Yeah.
what happens is, when you do the flip chart exercise, you're
Yeah.
really trying to get a
Yeah.
consensus done.
Dots or
It would be
Post-it
interesting
notes
though,
or
if you
whatever.
could, like, if, to do just exactly what Chris is saying, but then beforehand, so we could take it out to like our peers, our network, right? And just to say, what do you think about this, or what other wild ideas have you seen that have worked that that are not on this list even? So it's not just us.
Does that make sense? So does
I-
that make
yes,
sense? I mean,
yes.
if we get that ahead of time, so maybe before our next meeting, is that too fast, Tim, for you? I don't know your schedule, I don't wanna.
let me see.
I
So
think it would.
I'm out next week. It might be a little fast for February.
Yeah.
March is possible, but if we're gonna be looking at TIF, public hearing, I don't know how much you wanna talk about at that, but we,
Our goal then would be for the next meeting.
okay,
I know you're out next week.
No,
and-
that's
and then
fine,
we
that's
can-
fine.
And really, it's just putting the bullet points
Yep.
out there.
Yep.
From the tape and get it out to us. You can talk to people, we can talk to people. And then,
In reality, we're talking about 12% of the homes that are over 50 years in the community. So it's not a large
No.
number of homes. So that, if these are accurate, done an excellent job, I think, there, so.
however, within 10, 15 years, you're gonna have a real large
Yeah.
portion of them over 50 years
Yes.
old.
Yep.
So,
Some of those 1970 eras home probably need some help too.
yeah,
Yeah.
so. I agree with you, Gary. I mean, you're absolutely right. So let's shoot for that, Tim, to get that out. I'll come in and help you work on that. So we can get that out for our next meeting, because I think I think you're absolutely right. We're at that point where we've got a lot of information, and let's just start to come to a consensus on how we want to go about this. So, everybody agree?
I agree, and I just know that, Renee is pushed to the wall in every direction. It seems like year-round, so it's gonna be difficult to say, hey, can your staff pick this up? I don't see that happening.
Yeah, and maybe, Tim, it'd be good to get it to David, just to send it to him in an email, and he can look at it too, and he can give his input for our meeting. So we have that as well. All right. Everybody good?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Motion or second to adjourn. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
You guys were ayes, right?
Thank you, Kristen. We'd have been here till 11
Oh,
o'clock.
you're,
No,
you're,
so-
you're.
Oh, Gary doesn't know the rule.
Let me think about this.
Gary, we're done at 7:30, that's our rule.